Alrighty, so we are live. Sorry.
Excellent. I was just unplugging my speaker there that was giving some humming noise that I didn't want to interrupt our conversation.
Wonderful. So I'm joined by Caroline Smalley, and we are doing this broadcast on the unceded Coast Salish territories in my part of the world, in what's known as Vancouver, on the Musqueam, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Squamish Nations. And Caroline is joining us from Whistler, which is on the Squamish and Lil'wat Nations. So thank you so much for doing this podcast with us. And Caroline and I are going to switch roles. She's going to be asking my questions about the work that I do in the world. And so thank you so much, Caroline, for taking the time to be able to do this peer-to-peer podcast project. And I would welcome you to lead me on the journey.
Thank you, Tammy. And one thing that came to mind there was it's all too easy to feel on the hot seat when we're being asked questions. But I actually feel more in the hot seat being one who's got to ask the questions, because, you know, as you've always pointed out to me, and for as long as I've known you, that it's what are the questions that we need to ask each other.
Yes.
And the actual real secret is in the questions, because it's about listening to each other and being really ready to receive what that person is really saying, and being able to hear what it is that we're saying and how that's being received by other people. That's where the magic is. But anyway, I'm not supposed to be telling you what you're telling me. That's an interesting way to interview, right? So
no, thank you. I really appreciate the very real conversational style. And so you're doing great. We're doing great. Forward ho.
Well, thank you for the opportunity of interviewing you, Tammy. Perhaps we can kick off with you sharing a little bit about your work, an overview of what it is that you do, what brought you to it.
Great. Okay. Well, that's a big question. So maybe I'll start off by saying that since I was pretty young, I've always been curious about the world, and I had the opportunity when I was a kid to homestead. And in homesteading, we lived on the top of a mountain in Nova Scotia, and we had 100 acres, and we built our own house. We had a non-electric hydraulic ram to get water up from the stream. We had cows, chickens, goats, pigs, and we sustained ourselves on the land. And so that, as a child, gave me the opportunity to see how self-sustaining we can be, and to really muck in as far as the nuts and bolts of living. And it was at a formative time in my life. It was from the age of 9 and 13. And in that time, I also didn't have any access to media. So that gave me an opportunity to really experience the quiet of my own thoughts, and to be able to have a very different experience with different social experience, in not being inundated by messages and by how the world of television and radio at that point kind of is. And so as when I turned 30, I had a big transition in my life where I realized that even though waitering was fun and I could earn a great paycheck, it wasn't meaningful to me. And so I took some time and really was praying about what I could do and how I could make a contribution. And the thing in that kind of time of prayer and consideration and contemplation, 3 main areas came up to me as areas that needed innovation and needed a different framework. And they were media, democracy, and the economy. And so the low-hanging fruit for me was media, because one of the things that I thought was, well, anybody can make media. This was 1999, 2000, and so I started a practice of recording conversations and recording my thoughts. And I was in a big transition in my life and didn't have a lot of resources personally, and had a bit of a crisis where I had to figure out how to bring money in, and I had to also figure out how to also live these new ideas. And so I was at a Green party and here in Vancouver, and I met a person named Rick Logtenberg, and he and I got into this lively conversation about media, and we realized that we had a lot of the same passions. Mm-hmm. And so he and I, as well as a friend of his, Omer Ginor, started an organization called the People's Network. And the People's Network was a web-based community TV platform. And Rick had all the skills to actually make it happen. I had a lot of community passion, a lot of internal passion and community connections. And so we spent the better part of a year developing this platform. Now, remembering that this was 2001, so it was well before Facebook or YouTube. And so we created an online space where people could, where we could post community videos, really looking at what communities had to offer and what they were doing that was of benefit. So we went to a bunch of community events, and at that time, I had no idea how to be an executive director of an organization. I kind of just jumped in with both feet. And I was unable to get us the funding that we needed to carry on. So we wound that up in early 2002. But it was an amazing learning experience. And it showed me that whatever you want to do, you can do, even though it, in quotation marks, failed. It was absolutely not a failure in my learning journey. And then, so after that, I really wanted to learn how organizations worked. So I spent a decade at the Wilderness Committee, which is a grassroots environmental organization based out of Vancouver here. And the way that that the Wilderness Committee worked was very beautiful. All the staff members were part of interlocking teams that did work together and reported to each other. And it was a pretty flat management style as organizations go. And so I really learned about how organizations worked in that organization. And in 2009, I joined the board of a small credit union called CCEC. And and that turned my attention towards more deeply towards the economy. So through those experiences, I really have been able to formulate some ideas about how we can leverage who we are and what we bring to the table for social good. Mm-hmm. And so when I met you at in the up
Living the New Economy?
Yeah, Living the New Economy. I remember. I was incredibly inspired by your work as the Citizens Media, was very similar in intention to the People's Network. And so I thought, okay, well, how can we leverage what it is that we do so that we can help each other and move this more broad social and economic agenda forward?
What is it that really moves you, that really creates the passion? Being able to, make your own food and, you take care of yourself in that way and not have to make money all the time. And, you mentioned that you were, you weren't cash rich. That's not your thing, but it's getting enough money to to keep going to the next step. But what is the real sort of emotion that is behind the work, that's behind the passion?
Well, essentially, we are hooped. That's what I see. Like, unless we actually work together to create solutions. So, you know, there's a real sense of the time is now. Like, we are in the multiple systems failure across the planet. And so when I look at that, and then simultaneously know how many people like yourself are out there in the world creating things specifically to help bridge us and transition us to a better way of doing things, I am motivated to bring people together to have the conversations, to really say, hey, you know what, we're here, and unless we actually get our shizzle together, we're not going to survive. And this is not to say, you know, not to be negative, but in looking at what's going on the planet today, anyone would be concerned.
Yeah.
And so I see people all over the planet doing powerful things for change, but we're doing them separately. And so I see the conversation, a recorded conversation, a conversation that's live and for the record, as a critical tool to be able to tell the truth about what we see, to be able to bring people together to have conversations that are important to have, and to let people know how they can participate, so that we can weave our what we have to offer with what's needed, and really create a strong bridge to that future that we collectively envision.
Thank you. When you talk about media, and also when you were talking about, you know, we're hooped and we've got to do something now, the word ownership came to mind. With media, about communicating to people that this is what's going on in the world, but people hear that and they see the facts, but they don't own it.
Right.
And something that I see about the way that you work, of really getting to the source of the communication, about let's get real, because we have to get real if we're going to genuinely collaborate. This isn't about shaking hands over a business deal and we can get caught out by, you know, what's happening in the banks and all these con artists that are being exposed now in the world. We've got to get beyond that now.
Yes.
And, you know, I see the work in communication and your skill within that, about enabling these conversations. You did it at Impact Economy last October for us here in Whistler, and thank you for that. Yeah. So I just wondering, the work you've done, the work you've been doing in more recent years, if you can maybe speak a little bit more about that and how that feeds into this getting all the voices together in a way that communicates ownership to other people.
Fantastic. Okay, so I guess one of the pieces that I see is that more broadly, we have an acceptance of extractive means of in business, and media is modeled after that. You sign a release, and you release that that corporation to use your voice and image as they see fit. I see that there's the potential to have a completely different way of the ownership of media itself, and that I say it this way: the last thing that can be taken from us is our voice and our image. And so for example, you and I are having this collaborative conversation. My commitment and principle is that it belongs to both of us. And unless both of us agree that it goes out in the world, it's retained by us. And so it's an opportunity for us to come to agreement about what media we put out in the world, and to take ownership in a real way of our voice. And so I think that this is one of the critical shifts in paradigm that we need to have, And I find one of the things that I find interesting is that when I look to do media with people, because people already expect that I'm taking their media, there's a sense of what are you then going to do with it, and not a sense of collective ownership of it, because there's a backstory, right?
Yeah, conditions attached is what's coming to my mind. It's like all business deals, there's a condition attached. There's an expectation now. If you do this, if you're in this role, and that so much of that is what actually causes people to hide things. You know, it's like, oh, I've been told I'm going to get paid this much per month, and I've signed this contract to do this work. So then you're not real, you're not authentic anymore to the collaboration that is the business entity.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, you know, all over the world, what's happened by necessity is that business enclosures have been created to be able to steward resources. And what I'm in support of are business exclosures, right? So we exclose how we do things so that we're able to give everyone the tools to be able to empower themselves and to take charge of their own destiny. And for me, there's nowhere more relevant than that, than someone's ideas, their intellectual property. And so as we look at the TTIP, the TPP, and the TISA, these international agreements that threaten to radically change the on-the-ground impacts of business, this is an important time to be able to say, actually, there's a different way. We can own our means of production. We can own our own voices. And to my mind, that's incredibly important, because I'm not having a conversation on behalf of a corporation. I'm having a conversation on behalf of Tammy Lee Meyer, human, citizen. And so from that place, I want to come from that true place, an authentic concern that I have as a human, and not be, oh, they're saying, have someone think, she's saying that because Sony is paying her. I'm saying this because this is what I think. And what I would like to foster and develop and hold space for is for people to have the kind of conversations they have in the coffee shop, in the pub, in their living room, for the record, for everyone to see. Because we're having these conversations, and yet it's not what's seen in the traditional media. And I think it's important.
Genuine. And when you have genuine connection, that you can really get together.
Yes.
So even though it's sort of, I know that when many of our conversations about, okay, what do these agreements actually look like? And it's sort of, from my perspective, well, on Facebook and on YouTube, there are already agreements within that. People put their voice there, and they've already sold themselves. And if a video is produced anywhere on any particular place in the web, then how is it? People can put videos in other places. So as soon as you upload a video onto YouTube, or we're talking right now on Google Hangouts, that there are rights behind that. So it really is more of it's about having an agreement between two people before you actually engage in the conversation, and then honoring that agreement. So this conversation, even though it's on Google, and we are choosing, we're having it, and I trust you that you're not gonna share this in public view unless I agree to it.
Yes.
And there's no motivation, there's no preconception over why we're having this. And if I don't perform in a certain way, then I'm fired. Well, I might be. I don't know. You tell me.
No, you're not. I think you're inspired.
I wondered if you're inspirational. So thank you. And it's listening to recordings, listening to my own voice has been the only way for me that I've feel like I'm really getting what it is that you're saying. I also hate doing it. there's you pick up all the really, well, I pick up all the really annoying things about the way I communicate and waffle on. So before I waffle on anymore, I wondered if you could speak a little bit to that transition and how how you see that evolving.
So I guess what I'm really looking to do with these peer-to-peer conversations is to have the lived experience with other people of the power of sharing together, and the different dimensions of value that are a part of it. So you have the opportunity to share your work. You have an opportunity to grow and do and to take leadership in interviewing and to build your skills. We have an opportunity together to be able to show other people what we're doing so that we can help advocate for each other. There's so for me, to be able to have the opportunity to share and to share with someone who's been a really important influence in my life is powerful. And I see it as a journey. I see it as a form of inquiry and not an end to itself. And so as far as what it can do in the world is it can model a way of collaborating. It can model a way of working together to bring our skills, abilities, our passions, our projects together so that people can see that we can break down these silos. And in fact, we're stronger together. And so my hope is that more people will choose to have their work profiled. I'm so excited to be able to profile people's work. Matt Slater is someone who's agreed to have his work profiled at the lead up to the World Social Forum in Montreal this August. And so as well as, I'd love to do some work with Sensorica. Of course, I spent 6 weeks last fall or last summer there interning, and I think that their work is incredibly profound and has a strong potential to radically change how people work. And and then Art Brock with Scepter. There's all of these amazing humans. Stephanie Rearick with the Mutual Aid Network. I'd love to continue to work with people, but in a live, collaborative, for the record exploration of what's possible when we work together.
As you were speaking, the differences, I was sort of, the differences that we have, people who work in the new economy, we're all working on slightly different aspects, and that's a good thing, because it means that we're all focused on a particular part of the puzzle, and that the way that they emerge to then connect with each other, it's an evolution.
Yeah.
And that these conversations, by acknowledging and appreciating our differences and really seeing that, we've all got something unique here. There's a place for all of it within this. We don't know exactly how. Let's surrender to this idea that we know how it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. We don't. But let's work from a place of trust over knowing we feel the same pain that's going on in the world. We're all working to the same vision of the world we want to live in, the world we want to leave the generations behind us to come. And I just think that something really magical can emerge from the conversations that you have with people who have got different opinions about how we can get that shift to happen.
Yes.
Because when we're having those conversations from a place of inquiry, rather than my idea makes sense and yours doesn't, and no, there's not room for that, even though it's subtle and not said, that's what I think will be so powerful about the work you are doing. And thank you so much for the world. I'm really looking forward to being witness to it and to being part of it, part
Yeah.
of the journey with you. First, thank you.
So maybe in closing, Caroline, I wonder if you can share a little bit about your vision for the future, and maybe I can do a little of mine, so that we can kind of, what is this beautiful future that we're aiming for?
All right, back to the beginning of the conversation when I mentioned about being in the hot seat, asking questions about it. You're really good at it now, something I feel very much in the hot seat. Oh my goodness. Picture it. Picture a world without having to watch your back.
Mm.
Picture a world where you can trust whoever it is you're talking to, that every email that you send, you know that they know that you're real and that they're real. It's not somebody used to ways of working where they're in competition with you, but it's a place where there is trust.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
The release and freedom that will bring will create a world where we're dancing together. We're not in fear anymore. And that will just open up this whole world of possibilities that we haven't even thought about yet. I feel giddy just thinking about it. Mm. It's not going to be without, it's not just going to be, there'll be sadness within that. But the sadness will be a different type of experience. It won't be based on fear. Yes. But rather it will summon a curiosity. What else we can do together. It'll be an economy based on opportunity rather than lack.
Wonderful. Thank you. And how would I add to that? The future that I would love to assist in building towards includes every person having access to the economy as a baseline right. Every person having the ability to have their voice heard in a meaningful way. I see that our economy, through the work of you and others, needs to radically change, and we need to take control of our economy. It is a humanly created construct after all, and create systems where every person can participate and is enabled to and has access. And I think that through creating those baseline rights, we can create and dream into what a just and fair and equitable economic system can look like. And I think that will have a radical shift in how people feel safe in the world, how people feel they're able to participate and really be empowered. And so, yeah, we're working towards the same world, that's for sure.
And the solutions are there. It's just collectively people take ownership of that, then it's there. What we can do together is there. But take off the veil that it is our, that it's the way it is, and that's the way it is. Humans are this way. It's, you use the word system. Yeah, it's up to us what system we create that will then in turn govern our behavior. So let's take ownership together and let's change the world.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Tammy Meyer.
Thank you so much, Caroline Smalley. As always, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Very much so.